let's turn to Michael Becker. He's a former legal officer at the ICJ and currently an assistant professor of international human rights law at Trinity College in Dublin. Michael, this ICJ ruling, as you know, is legally binding, but the court really has no way to enforce it. So what really is the significance here?
Well, you're absolutely right. And at this point, this is now the fourth time that South Africa has gone to the ICJ seeking provisional measures or this kind of urgent interim relief. And at this point, I feel like the court has already done what it can in terms of imposing legal measures that should put significant political pressure on Israel and Israel's supporters to change course. But of course, we haven't seen the court's orders have be particularly effective so far. Nonetheless, this is the first time that the court has been willing to actually order Israel to suspend military operations, and that's something South Africa has repeatedly requested. Until now, the court wasn't willing to do that, and the fact that they now see that as the only means left to try to prevent irreparable prejudice to the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza in this case, I think is significant, even if only symbolically.
Watching these proceedings, Michael, what stood out to you the most?
Well, going back to the hearing last week, we again see what we've seen in this case before, which are two completely different factual narratives. And it's as if the two sides are not really even speaking to one another. And I think that makes this very difficult for the court and means that the court has to deal with a factual record made up of completely divergent points of view. It is significant to me, though, that there was a question at the end of the hearing last week from Judge Nolte, the judge from Germany, that specifically asked Israel to provide information or assurances about what Israel was going to do to provide for the safety of those people being displaced from Rafah because of the military offensive. And we can see in the decision today that Israel's response to that question was not satisfactory to Judge Nolte or to the court as a whole, because I think that lack of assurance played a significant role in the court deciding that the only way to ensure that humanitarian aid can get into Gaza, or at least into Rafah, means a halt to the military offensive in Rafah.
Israel, of course, has repeatedly said it has the right to defend itself. It called the ruling outrageous. It's very unlikely that it will follow through with the court's order. So will there be any kind of consequences in these types of situations?
Well, that's hard to say. I do think that the narrative around this essentially leaving Israel defenseless is incorrect and misleading. I don't think the court's order should be interpreted to mean that Israel cannot respond to future attacks by Hamas or any other armed groups. That, I don't think, is what the court intends. And to me, that's a false reading of what the court is saying here. So that's one point. I also just wanted to respond to a point from the intro report, which is this idea that the court's order is focused only on Israel and not making any mention of the hostages. And that's not correct. The court, in a paragraph at the very end of the decision, made clear that it calls once again for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages. I think the court is doing what it can to be cognizant of Israel's position in this conflict, but at the same time is not willing to accept arguments that say, because of the horrific attacks of October 7th, Israel can simply proceed without any limitations upon the nature of its military response.
And Michael, finally, how much of a blow is this for Israel on the world stage, which, it's finding itself increasingly isolated diplomatically? As you know, Norway, Spain, and Ireland just this week announced they plan to recognize the Palestinian statehood on top of the ICC decision, saying that they could seek arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders.
Well, it's another rebuke, that's for sure. But at this point, I'm not sure that it's going to move a lot of people one way or the other who haven't already taken a position on this conflict. Israel is incredibly isolated. Israel has, by some measure, squandered some of the goodwill that it would have had on its side following the terrible experience of October 7th. The nature of its response has simply made a lot of people find it very hard to kind of turn the other way watching what's happening in Gaza, or at least as things are being reported in Gaza. So this is another rebuke, but it comes in the wake of several rebukes that Israel has already experienced in this case brought by South Africa. So I'm not sure how much further this can push things beyond where they already are.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Michael Becker joining us from Dublin. Thank you so much.